The luxury sedan's engine dies on a forgotten street in Millbrook, Ohio. Claire Hammond steps out, her designer heels clicking against cracked pavement as she approaches the dim glow spilling from a half-open garage. Inside, a man with calloused hands and grease-stained fingers holds a flashlight over an engineering textbook, his weathered face creased in concentration. The beam flickers weakly. He taps it. The light steadies. Beside him on a threadbare couch, a small boy clutches a worn teddy bear, breathing softly in sleep. The mechanic's lips move silently as he traces complex formulas, with his fingertip completely absorbed in midnight learning. Claire watches, transfixed by this scene of desperate determination. She doesn't yet know this single father's real identity, or that her company destroyed his life 3 years ago. The flashlight dies completely, plunging the garage into darkness. The sudden silence breaks the spell. Ryan Torres looks up from his textbook, his tired eyes adjusting to the darkness beyond the garage opening. A woman stands, silhouetted against the streetlight, her posture uncertain. Her car sits motionless behind her, steam rising from under the hood. He sets the dead flashlight aside and stands, his joints protesting after hours hunched over equations. The boy on the couch stirs but doesn't wake. Ryan approaches cautiously, noting the expensive cut of the woman's clothing, the gleam of jewelry that catches what little light remains. She doesn't belong here in this forgotten corner of Ohio where dreams come to die. Car trouble? His voice carries the roughness of a man who speaks more to engines than people. Claire startles at the sound, her hand instinctively moving to her purse. Rich people always expect the worst from places like this. I'm sorry to bother you. Claire begins, her voice carrying an accent that speaks of boardrooms and country clubs. My engine just stopped. I don't suppose you know anything about cars. The question hangs in the air between them, and Ryan almost smiles. Here stands a woman who probably spends more on dinner than he makes in a week, asking if he knows about cars. If she only knew that engineering textbook had been his companion for 18 months. I might know a thing or two, he says, grabbing a working flashlight from his toolbox. The beam illuminates her face fully for the first time, revealing features that suggest she's never known real hardship. But there's something in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability that surprises him. Let's take a look. He moves toward her car, his boots crunching on gravel. Most decent people avoid this part of town after dark, which makes her presence puzzling. Claire follows, her heels struggling with the uneven ground. She catches herself against the car's fender, her fingers coming away slightly grimy. Ryan notices her small frown of distaste and suppresses familiar resentment. He pops the hood with practiced efficiency, the flashlight beam dancing across engine components. The diagnosis is immediate and unfortunate. Electrical systems shot, he announces, his voice neutral despite the complications this creates. You'll need parts, probably a tow to a proper shop. The woman's face falls, and for a moment she looks genuinely lost. Is there a hotel nearby? Ryan considers lying, telling her about decent places 20 miles down the highway. Instead, he finds himself offering something that goes against every survival instinct. There's a motel about 10 miles out, but they're probably full with the county fair. You could... He hesitates. There's a couch inside. It's not much, but it's clean and safe. The offer hangs between them like a bridge neither is sure they want to cross. Claire studies his face in the flashlight's glow, searching for signs of danger. What she finds instead is bone-deep exhaustion, and something that might be kindness. The smart thing would be to call a cab, find another solution that doesn't involve trusting a stranger. But something about this man makes her nod slowly. That's very kind. I'm Claire Hammond. Ryan Torres. The name means nothing to her, though it should. 3 years ago, it was splashed across newspaper headlines and whispered in courtrooms. But corporate executives rarely remember the small business owners their companies consume. Ryan releases her hand and steps back, suddenly aware of how he must look. Grease under his fingernails, work clothes that have seen better years, the lingering smell of motor oil. Inside the small living space attached to the garage, Ryan moves quietly, mindful of the sleeping child. He retrieves a clean pillow and faded but soft blanket. The gesture is automatic, muscle memory of someone who's spent years making sure others are comfortable. Claire takes in the modest surroundings. Everything is clean but worn, maintained with the kind of care that comes from having too few possessions to waste any. The boy on the couch shifts in his sleep, and Ryan's entire demeanor changes. His movements become even more careful. His voice drops to barely a whisper. "That's Lucas," he says, and the love in his voice is unmistakable. "He's 8. Lost his mom 2 years ago." The simple statement carries untold weight of grief and responsibility, and the kind of love that reshapes a man's world. Claire finds herself studying the child's face, noting his resemblance to Ryan. "He's beautiful," she whispers, and means it. Something about the scene touches something deep in her chest. She's built her life around meetings and mergers, around profit margins and market shares. When was the last time she encountered love this uncomplicated? Ryan adjusts the blanket around Lucas with infinite gentleness, and Claire sees his hands shake slightly, not from fear or cold, but from exhaustion and the constant weight of being everything to someone. "I should let you get some rest," Ryan says, but he doesn't move toward the door. Instead, he remains standing near his son, torn between politeness and reluctance to leave Lucas even for a moment. The protective instinct is so strong it's almost tangible. Claire has never been responsible for another human being's well-being, never felt the crushing weight of being someone's entire world. "Actually," Claire says, surprised by her own words, "I'm not very tired. Would you mind if I asked what you were reading? That textbook looked pretty advanced." The question seems to surprise Ryan. He glances toward the garage, where the engineering manual still lies open beside the dead flashlight, then back at her face, searching for mockery. Finding none, he shrugs slightly. "Mechanical engineering, working toward my degree, slowly. Very slowly." The admission comes with a self-deprecating smile that doesn't quite hide the pride underneath. Here's a man chasing knowledge the hard way, page by page, night after night, without lecture halls or study groups. Claire finds herself genuinely intrigued. There's something both heartbreaking and inspiring about this man bent over textbooks by flashlight after working all day. "That's impressive. How long have you been studying?" The question opens something in Ryan's expression, a crack in the careful wall he maintains. For a moment, he looks younger, more vulnerable, like someone who's spent too long being strong for everyone else. 3 years. Started right after." He trails off, his eyes finding Lucas again. "Right after everything changed. Figured I needed something more than just fixing cars if I was going to give him the life he deserves." The statement is matter-of-fact, but Claire catches the undertone of desperation. This isn't just about career advancement. This is about survival, about being worthy of the trust a child places in his only parent. Claire settles carefully onto the edge of a worn armchair, her expensive dress incongruous against faded fabric. What changed 3 years ago? The question is gentle, but she can see it hits Ryan like a physical blow. His jaw tightens, and for a moment, she thinks he won't answer. When he does speak, his voice carries the careful neutrality of someone who's told this story to skeptical audiences before. "Lost my business. Family garage. Been in the Torres family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it from nothing. My father expanded it and I—" He stops, his hands clenching. "I lost it all in 18 months. Criminal negligence, they said." "Criminal negligence?" she repeats carefully. Ryan's laugh is bitter, devoid of humor. It's the sound of a man who's learned that justice and truth don't always align. He moves to the window, looking out at darkness as if he can see ghosts of everything he's lost. Insurance fraud, they called it. Said I was skimming from customer policies. $200,000 supposedly vanished, and somehow all evidence pointed back to me. Claire's blood chills. The amount, the time frame, the nature of accusations. Something about this story feels familiar, though she can't place where she's heard it before. Were you guilty? The question slips out before she can stop herself, and she immediately regrets it. Ryan turns from the window, his face cycling through hurt, anger, and finally resignation. Would it matter if I said no? 3 years ago, I thought truth was enough. He continues quietly. Thought if I could just explain. Show them the real books. Someone would listen. Someone would care that a family business was being destroyed, that a man's reputation was being shredded. His voice grows quieter with each word. But truth is a luxury when you're fighting people who can afford better stories than yours. The weight of his words settles over the room like a heavy blanket. Claire finds herself studying Ryan's face, searching for signs of deception. Instead, she sees something that looks like raw honesty, the kind of truth that comes from a man who's had 3 years to examine his conscience and found it clear. The realization disturbs her more than she wants to admit. What happened to Lucas during all this? She asks softly. Lucas stirs on the couch, making a small sound before settling deeper into sleep. Ryan's expression immediately gentles, the hard edges of remembered injustice softening into something infinitely tender. He moves to adjust the boy's blanket again, the gesture automatic and loving. That's actually not... Lucas isn't my biological son. He was my sister's boy. Maria died in a car accident 2 years ago, and suddenly I had an 8-year-old to care for while fighting to clear my name and keep a roof over our heads. Ryan's hand hovers over Lucas's shoulder. Social services wanted to place him in foster care, said a man facing criminal charges wasn't suitable guardian material. Had to jump through hoops most people can't imagine just to keep him with me. The revelation hits Claire like a physical blow. This man, fighting his own battles with disgrace and financial ruin, took on the responsibility of raising his orphaned nephew. The kind of selfless love that requires isn't something she encounters in her world of corporate mergers. She watches Ryan's gentle touch as he smooths Lucas's hair, and something shifts in her chest. That must have been incredibly difficult, she says, and the inadequacy of her words echoes in the small room. Ryan nods absently, his attention still focused on the sleeping child. There's a story in every line of his face, in the careful way he moves around Lucas. This is what sacrifice looks like, Claire realizes. Not calculated business risks, but the daily choice to put someone else's needs before your own survival. The hardest part was explaining why we had to leave our house, why Daddy's garage wasn't Daddy's anymore, why we couldn't afford things he was used to. Ryan's voice breaks slightly. 8-year-olds don't understand legal battles or insurance fraud investigations. They just know that one day their world was stable, and the next day everything familiar was disappearing. Claire feels tears threaten, which surprises her. She's spent years building walls around her emotions, learning to see human cost as abstract numbers on quarterly reports. But sitting in this modest room, watching a man's love for his child play out in whispered words and gentle touches, those walls feel suddenly fragile. How do you explain something like that to a child? You don't, Ryan says simply. You just love them through it. You get up every morning and make their breakfast and help them with homework and read bedtime stories. And you pray that love is enough to help them make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense to adults either. He looks at Claire then, really looks at her. You don't have children, do you? The question shouldn't sting, but it does. No, I've always been too busy building my career. There never seemed to be time for that kind of commitment. The word feels hollow as soon as she says it, especially in the context of Ryan's obvious devotion to Lucas. What kind of commitments has she made, really? To quarterly earnings? To stockholders she's never met? I used to think that too, Ryan says gently. Before Maria died. Before Lucas. I thought success meant building something, leaving a legacy, proving you could climb higher than where you started. Now I think maybe success is just loving someone well enough that they feel safe in a world that isn't always safe. His words carry the weight of hard-won wisdom. The conversation lapses into comfortable silence, broken only by Lucas's steady breathing and distant traffic. Claire finds herself studying the details of their modest home, noting how every item seems carefully maintained despite its age. There's a dignity in their poverty that she's never encountered before, a richness that has nothing to do with money. Morning arrives with the sound of quiet movement and the smell of coffee. Claire opens her eyes to find Lucas sitting at a small table, carefully cutting his toast into star shapes, while Ryan moves around the tiny kitchen with practiced efficiency. The scene has a rhythm to it, a choreography of daily routine that speaks to years of practice. Father and son move around each other with unconscious consideration. "Good morning," Lucas says, when he notices Claire stirring. His voice carries Ryan's careful politeness, but his eyes hold a child's natural curiosity. "Dad made extra coffee if you want some. He always makes too much because he forgets I don't drink it yet." The casual mention of Dad, rather than uncle, tells Claire everything about how they've chosen to define their relationship. "That would be lovely," Claire says, accepting the mug Ryan offers. The coffee is strong and black, the kind that speaks to early mornings and long days. She watches Lucas continue his star-shaped breakfast ritual, noting the concentration on his young face. "Why stars?" she asks, genuinely curious about this charming routine. Lucas looks up with Ryan's eyes and his mother's smile. "Dad says stars are for making wishes, and breakfast is for starting new days, so star breakfast means every day might bring something you wished for." The logic is pure child wisdom, the kind that makes perfect sense until you're old enough to learn better. Claire feels something warm spread through her chest. "That's beautiful," she says, and Lucas beams with pride. Ryan catches her eye over the boy's head, and she sees gratitude there, appreciation for someone treating his child's quirks as charming rather than silly. It's another small window into their world, another glimpse of how carefully Ryan has worked to preserve wonder and optimism. "I should probably check on your car," Ryan says after breakfast, but he doesn't sound enthusiastic. Claire realizes that fixing her car means she'll leave, and that departure will return them both to their separate worlds. The thought bothers her more than it should. In 12 hours, this man and his son have given her something she didn't know she was missing. The morning light reveals the full extent of her car's problems, and Ryan's diagnosis is thorough and discouraging. "You're looking at $600 minimum, probably more once we get into the electrical system. The parts alone will take 2 days to order, maybe 3. He delivers the news with professional detachment, but Claire catches something else in his voice. Relief, perhaps, that she won't be disappearing immediately. $600, she repeats, though the amount means nothing to her. She spends more than that on shoes she wears once. But she can see in Ryan's expression that $600 represents something significant, probably more than he sees in profit from a week's work. "I know it's a lot," Ryan says quietly, misreading her silence. "If you want to have it towed to a dealership in Columbus, I understand." "No," Claire says quickly, surprising herself with the vehemence of her response. "I trust you to fix it. Take whatever time you need." The decision feels important somehow, like a choice between more than just repair options. She's choosing to stay in their world a little longer, to delay her return to conference calls and board meetings. Over the following days, Claire finds herself settling into the rhythm of their life. She helps Lucas with homework while Ryan studies his engineering textbooks after work. She learns that the boy is exceptionally bright, that his math skills exceed his grade level, that he draws elaborate pictures of airplanes with focused intensity. "I want to build planes that don't crash," Lucas explains one evening. "Like the one that hurt my mama." The simple statement breaks Claire's heart and mends it simultaneously. Here's a child who's taken personal tragedy and transformed it into purposeful ambition. "That's a wonderful goal," Claire says, studying his drawing with genuine admiration. "Have you thought about what kind of engineering you'd need to study?" The question launches Lucas into an enthusiastic explanation that reveals both his intelligence and the hours Ryan must spend encouraging his curiosity. That night, Claire finds Ryan in the garage, as usual, bent over his textbooks in the circle of LED light he's rigged. She settles into the folding chair he's provided, a gesture that suggests he's grown accustomed to her evening presence. The domestic intimacy of the moment strikes her forcefully. When was the last time she shared comfortable silence with another human being? "Can I ask you something?" she says eventually. Ryan looks up from a complex diagram, his pencil poised over notes written in careful handwriting. "Why engineering? You're obviously good with your hands. You understand mechanical systems. You could probably make decent money just fixing cars for the rest of your life." Ryan sets down his pencil and leans back, considering the question. "Because Lucas deserves better than decent," he says finally. "Because I want him to see that you don't have to accept the hand life deals you. Because—" he pauses, struggling with something deeper. "Because I need to prove that I'm not the man those court documents said I was. That I'm not a criminal or a failure." The pain in his voice is raw, unguarded, and Claire feels something shift inside her chest. She's beginning to understand that Ryan's midnight studying isn't just about career advancement. It's about redemption, about rebuilding an identity that was shattered by accusations he couldn't disprove. Every page he turns is an act of defiance against the narrative others wrote about his character. "Tell me about the insurance fraud accusation," she says gently, "if you want to, if it's not too painful." Ryan's hands still on the textbook pages, and she can see him weighing whether to trust her with the full story. When he speaks, his voice is steady. "My financial advisor was a man named Richard Mullins. Came highly recommended. Seemed to know everyone worth knowing. He convinced me to let him handle all insurance policies for customer vehicles, said he could get better rates. What I didn't know was that he was skimming premium payments, creating fake policies, manipulating claims data." Ryan's voice grows flat, recounting facts rather than emotions. 18 months. Long enough to create a pattern that looked deliberate when investigators finally untangled it. Claire feels ice forming in her veins, though she still can't place why this story feels so familiar. "How long did this go on?" she asks, dreading the answer. "Long enough to steal $200,000 that customers had paid in good faith. And because I was the business owner, because my name was on all accounts, I was the one who got charged." Ryan picks up his pencil again. "Mullins disappeared 3 days before the investigation began." The pieces begin falling into place in Claire's mind, creating a picture that makes her stomach turn. "What happened to your business while all this was going on?" she asks, though she's beginning to suspect she knows the answer. Her voice sounds strange to her own ears, tight with growing dread. "Customers stopped coming the minute the accusations went public. Within 6 months, I couldn't make mortgage payments on the garage building. Bank foreclosed, and the property went up for sale." Ryan's voice remains steady, but Claire can see his knuckles whiten as he grips the pencil. "Sold to Hammond Industries for about half what it was worth. They tore it down and built a parts distribution center." The name hits Claire like a physical blow. Hammond Industries. Her company. Her family's legacy. She feels the blood drain from her face, feels her hands begin to tremble. Ryan notices her reaction immediately, his expression shifting from resignation to concern. "Claire, are you all right?" She can't speak, can't breathe. The room seems to tilt around her as a realization settles over her. Hammond Industries didn't just buy Ryan's property, they orchestrated his destruction. She knows because she's seen the acquisition reports, knows how her company identifies undervalued properties and creates circumstances that drive down purchase prices. It's called strategic acquisition planning, and it's perfectly legal even when it destroys lives. "Claire?" Ryan's voice seems to come from very far away. She looks at him, this man who's spent 3 years rebuilding his life after her company demolished it, who's studying engineering by flashlight because he can't afford proper lighting. He has no idea who she is, no clue that the woman he's welcomed into his home represents everything that destroyed his world. "I need some air," she manages to whisper, pushing herself unsteadily to her feet. Ryan rises too, reaching out as if to steady her, and she has to step back to avoid his touch. The kindness in his gesture makes everything worse. "I just need a minute." Outside, the Ohio night air tastes like regret and revelation. Claire leans against the garage, trying to process what she's learned. When she finally returns to the garage, Ryan is pretending to read his textbook, but she can see the worry in his shoulders. "Better?" he asks gently, and the concern in his voice nearly undoes her completely. "Ryan," she begins, then stops. "How do you confess to destroying someone's life? How do you explain that your company's success was built partly on his failure?" "Whatever it is," he says quietly, "you can tell me. I'm not exactly in a position to judge anyone else's mistakes." The irony of his words is almost unbearable. Here's a man offering absolution to the person who helped destroy him. "I work for Hammond Industries," she says finally, the words falling between them like stones into still water. The silence that follows seems to last forever. She watches Ryan's face as understanding dawns, watches the careful neutrality he maintains, even as she sees something die in his eyes. "I see," he says eventually, his voice carefully modulated. "That explains the car, the clothes, the way you carry yourself. Are you here officially, checking on the company's investment?" "No," Claire says quickly. "God, no. This is completely coincidental. I was driving back from a business meeting in Cleveland. My car broke down. I had no idea who you were." The explanation sounds hollow even to her own ears, like a convenient excuse rather than truth. Ryan nods slowly, processing this information. "Your company," he repeats, and she catches the emphasis. "Not just Hammond Industries. Your company." The realization seems to hit him in stages, his expression shifting from resignation to something that might be anger. "You're Claire Hammond, the CEO who's been running the company for the past 5 years. "Yes," she whispers, the admission feeling like a confession. "I signed the paperwork for your property acquisition. I approved the purchase." She stops, unable to continue, unable to voice the full extent of her complicity in his destruction. The silence stretches between them, heavy with revelation. Claire watches Ryan's face, searching for rage or accusation. Instead, she sees something worse: disappointment. Does Lucas know? The question surprises her, not what she expected, not demands for explanation or restitution. Just concern for his child, even now. Even facing the person responsible for their reduced circumstances, his first thought is protecting the boy sleeping peacefully in the next room. "Of course not," Claire says. "He thinks I'm just someone whose car broke down, which is true, which is all that's true about why I'm here." The distinction feels important somehow, the need to preserve at least that much honesty in a situation built on accidental deception. Ryan stands and moves to the garage opening, looking out at the darkness beyond. His silhouette against the streetlight reminds Claire of that first night. What happens now? He asks without turning around. Do you disappear back to your boardroom? Do you pretend this never happened? Do you add it to your collection of strategic acquisition success stories? The questions hit like physical blows, each one aimed at the heart of who she's been for the past 5 years. I don't know, she admits. I honestly don't know. This isn't something they teach you in business school. Her voice breaks slightly on the last words. The weight of what she's done, what her company has done, feels crushing. Is that what this has been for you? Ryan asks, turning back to face her. An accident? A temporary inconvenience before you get back to your real life? There's no anger in his voice, which somehow makes the questions more devastating. She would prefer rage to this quiet disappointment. No, Claire says fiercely. It hasn't been an inconvenience. It's been the most real thing I've experienced in years. Watching you with Lucas, seeing how you've built a life out of nothing, learning what actual love looks like. She's babbling now, words spilling out faster than she can organize them. I can't go back to signing acquisition paperwork without thinking about the Ryan Torres behind every strategic purchase. Ryan studies her face in the dim light, searching for something she's not sure she can provide. What are you saying, Claire? That you're sorry? That you'll try to do better in the future? His voice is gentle, but the words cut deep. Because I've heard those promises before, from lawyers and judges and everyone else who said they cared about justice. I'm saying I want to fix this, Claire says desperately. I want to find a way to give you back what you lost, to clear your name, to make sure Lucas has every opportunity he deserves. I have resources and connections and the power to investigate what really happened with Richard Mullins and prove that you were innocent. Why? The question stops her short. Why would you do that? What's in it for Hammond Industries? How does helping me improve your quarterly projections? His questions aren't accusatory. They're genuinely puzzled, as if he can't comprehend motivation that doesn't center on financial benefit. Claire realizes she doesn't have a good answer, at least not one that makes sense in the corporate framework she's lived within for so long. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I've seen what kind of man you are, what kind of other you are, and I know you don't deserve what happened to you. The right thing to do, Ryan repeats thoughtfully. That's not usually how business decisions get made, is it? In my experience, the right thing to do and the profitable thing to do rarely align. He moves back to his chair but doesn't sit down. I appreciate the sentiment, Claire. I really do. But I've spent 3 years learning not to trust promises from people who have power but no real incentive to follow through. The rejection stings, but Claire realizes she deserves it. She's asking him to trust her based on a few days of shared domesticity, to believe that she'll upend her company's practices because she's glimpsed his life from the inside. From his perspective, she's a wealthy stranger who's suddenly developed a conscience. You're right, she says quietly. You have no reason to trust me. I'm the person who signed the papers that destroyed your life, and now I'm asking you to believe I want to fix it. She looks around the garage, taking in the careful organization, the makeshift lighting system. But I need you to know that these past few days have changed something in me. I can't pretend that every signature doesn't represent someone's world being turned upside down. What exactly are you proposing? Ryan asks, sitting down heavily. Specifically, not grand gestures or philosophical changes, but concrete actions that would actually make a difference in Lucas's life and mine. The question forces her to think beyond good intentions to actual implementation, and she realizes she doesn't have a detailed plan. I want to investigate the Richard Mullins situation, she says slowly, working through possibilities as she speaks. I have access to legal resources, private investigators, financial forensics experts. If there's evidence that proves your innocence, I can find it and make sure the right people see it. She pauses, seeing skepticism in his eyes. "And I want to offer you a real engineering position with my company, working for the company that destroyed my family's garage," Ryan says, and now there's a bitter edge to his voice. "Helping Hammond Industries make more strategic acquisitions. Do you see the irony in that offer, Claire?" She does see it, and it makes her stomach turn. Every solution she proposes seems to trap them deeper in the web of corporate complicity. "Then help me change how the company operates," she says desperately. "Come work for me. Help me develop acquisition practices that don't destroy people's lives, that create value for communities instead of extracting it." The words sound naive even to her own ears, but she means them completely. Ryan looks at her for a long moment, and she can see him weighing her words against his experience, hope against hard-learned skepticism. "You really believe you can change a company that's been operating the same way for decades? You think one person, even the CEO, can overcome institutional momentum and shareholder pressure?" "I don't know," Claire says honestly. "But I have to try, because the alternative is going back to being the person who signs papers that destroy lives and justifies it with profit margins. I can't be that person anymore, not after seeing what it actually costs." The admission feels like stripping away every professional identity she's built. The conversation falls into silence, both of them lost in thoughts too complex for words. Outside, the night sounds of Ohio drift through the garage opening. Claire finds herself thinking about all the other strategic acquisitions Hammond Industries has completed, wondering how many other Ryan Torres stories exist in their corporate history. "I need to think about all this," Ryan says finally. "It's a lot to process, and I can't make decisions that affect Lucas without considering every angle." He looks toward the door where his nephew sleeps peacefully. "Can we continue this conversation tomorrow, after I've had time to let everything settle?" Claire nods, though part of her wants to keep talking, to work through every implication until they find a solution that satisfies both justice and practicality. "Of course. I should have told you who I was from the beginning." She pauses, then asks quietly, "Would you have? If you'd known who I was when your car broke down, would you have introduced yourself as Claire Hammond?" The question stops her cold. Would she have revealed her identity, knowing it would change everything about their interaction? "I don't know," she admits. "I'd like to think I would have been honest, but I honestly don't know." The admission feels like another small surrender of the certainties that used to define her. "That's the most honest thing you've said all night," Ryan observes, and there's something that might be approval in his voice. "The fact that you're not sure suggests you understand the complexity better than I expected." Claire isn't sure whether that's a compliment or an accusation, but she finds herself grateful for it either way. The next morning brings the familiar sounds of breakfast preparation, but the atmosphere feels different now. Ryan moves around the kitchen with the same careful efficiency, but there's tension in his shoulders that wasn't there before. Lucas chatters about school and homework, oblivious to the undercurrents flowing between the adults in his world. "Claire's car should be ready today," Ryan tells Lucas over breakfast, and the boy's face falls with genuine disappointment. The reaction touches something in Claire's chest, the recognition that this child has grown attached to her presence. When was the last time anyone was disappointed by her departure rather than relieved? "Does that mean you're leaving?" Lucas asks her directly, and Claire finds herself struggling to answer. The simple question carries so much weight now, implications that reach far beyond travel logistics into questions of responsibility and relationship. "I don't know yet," she says honestly. "There are some things your dad and I need to discuss first." After Lucas leaves for school, Claire and Ryan face each other across the small kitchen table like negotiators in a high-stakes business deal. Except this isn't about profit margins. It's about justice and redemption and the possibility of making amends for damage that can't be entirely undone. I've been thinking about your offer, Ryan says without preamble. The investigation, the job, the whole package. And I have some conditions. His voice is steady, businesslike, and Claire recognizes the tone of someone who's learned to protect himself in negotiations with people who hold more power. I'm listening, she says, settling into her chair and giving him her full attention. This feels like the most important business meeting of her career, though it's taking place in a modest kitchen over coffee that costs less per pound than she usually spends on lunch. First, if we do this, I want complete transparency. I want to see every document, every piece of evidence, every legal filing. I won't be shut out of the process just because I don't have a law degree. Ryan's eyes are steady on hers, and she can see the determination there, the refusal to be marginalized again. Agreed, Claire says immediately. You have the right to be fully informed about everything that affects you. More than that, you have expertise about your own case that no outside investigator could match. The commitment feels easy to make, though she knows implementing it within her company's legal framework will be challenging. Second, Ryan continues, if you offer me a job, it has to be real. Not a token position created to assuage corporate guilt, not busy work designed to keep me quiet, but actual engineering work that uses my education and contributes something meaningful. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. I won't be Hammond Industries' poster child for corporate redemption. The condition stings because Claire can see how easily she might have fallen into exactly that trap, using Ryan's story as a public relations tool rather than treating him as a skilled professional. Understood, she says. If you join the company, it will be because we need your skills, not because we need your story. Third, Ryan says, his voice growing quieter. Whatever we do, Lucas comes first. Every decision, every opportunity, every risk has to be evaluated based on what's best for him. I won't compromise his stability or his future, even for the chance to clear my name or advance my career. The fierce protectiveness in his voice reminds Claire of everything she's learned about Ryan's character over the past few days. Here's a man who's built his entire life around ensuring one child's well-being, who's studied engineering by flashlight and accepted reduced circumstances, all to provide stability for a boy who isn't even his biological son. That's not a condition, she says softly. That's just good parenting. Ryan's expression softens slightly at her words, and she sees some of the defensive tension leave his shoulders. There's one more thing, he says. If we do this, I need to know that you're committed for the long term. I can't afford to have you lose interest when the novelty wears off. The challenge in his words is clear, and Claire realizes he's testing her resolve, trying to determine whether her offer stems from genuine commitment or temporary guilt. How do I prove that to you? She asks. What would convince you that this isn't just a rich person's impulse to do good? I don't know, Ryan admits. Trust isn't something that can be negotiated or guaranteed. It has to be built over time, through consistent actions. He looks out the window toward the street where her repaired car waits. Maybe we start small. Maybe you take my case to your legal team and see what they can uncover about Richard Mullins. Claire nods, recognizing the wisdom in his approach. Grand gestures might satisfy her need to take immediate action, but they won't build the foundation of trust that any long-term solution would require. That makes sense, she says. Start with the investigation, see what we can prove, and build from there. And Claire, Ryan says, as they both stand to clear their coffee cups. I need you to understand something. Even if we prove I was innocent, that doesn't make us even. It doesn't erase what Hammond Industries did or undo the damage or give back the years Lucas and I spent struggling. His voice is matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. I understand, Claire says, and she does. Justice and restitution aren't the same thing, and some harms can't be fully repaired no matter how sincere the effort. I can't undo the past, but I can try to make sure the future is different. The promise feels both inadequate and essential, a starting point rather than a solution. The investigation takes months, involving private detectives and forensic accountants who specialize in insurance fraud cases. Gradually, a picture emerges of Richard Mullins as a serial con artist who targeted small business owners across multiple states, always disappearing before authorities could build cases against him. More disturbing is evidence suggesting that Hammond Industries representatives knew about the fraud investigation before making their purchase offer. Armed with this evidence, Claire's legal team approaches the district attorney who handled Ryan's case, presenting documentation that proves his innocence beyond reasonable doubt. The process of officially clearing his name takes more months of legal maneuvering, but eventually the charges are formally dropped and Ryan receives a written apology from the prosecutor. More challenging is the internal work Claire must do within her own company, confronting board members about acquisition practices that represent systematic exploitation of vulnerable business owners. The conversations are difficult, filled with resistance from people who see corporate social responsibility as a marketing tool rather than operational philosophy. "We're not a charity," one board member argues during a heated meeting about proposed changes. "Our responsibility is to shareholders, not to every small business owner who gets caught up in market forces." The argument represents everything Claire used to believe, the worldview that made Ryan's destruction seem acceptable. Market forces, Claire repeats, thinking about Ryan studying by flashlight and Lucas drawing airplanes that don't crash. Is that what we call it when we deliberately exploit someone's legal troubles to drive down property values? The questions challenge assumptions that have guided company policy for decades, and the resistance is fierce. The process of reform is slow and often frustrating, requiring Claire to build coalitions within her own company and convince people who benefit from the current system that change serves their long-term interests. Some battles she wins, implementing new due diligence requirements that consider social impact alongside financial benefits. Others she loses, running up against institutional momentum stronger than any individual executive's convictions. Through it all, she maintains regular contact with Ryan and Lucas, calling every few days to update them on progress and to hear about Lucas's school projects and Ryan's continued studies. These conversations become anchors in her week, reminders of why the larger reform efforts matter, even when progress feels impossibly slow. The day Ryan's name is officially cleared, Claire drives back to Millbrook with news that will change everything. She finds them in the garage, as usual, but this time Ryan is helping Lucas with a science project instead of studying his own textbooks. The engineering degree is complete, framed and hanging on the wall. "Congratulations," Claire says, gesturing toward the diploma. "Dr. Torres, mechanical engineer." The title fits him perfectly, recognizing both his academic achievement and the practical expertise he's demonstrated. Ryan's smile is the first completely unguarded expression she's seen from him, proud and relieved and hopeful in ways that legal vindication couldn't quite accomplish. The job offer discussion takes hours, covering everything from salary and benefits to project assignments and career development. Claire has worked to create a position that utilizes Ryan's unique combination of practical experience and theoretical knowledge, involving him in developing more sustainable approaches to industrial manufacturing. It's real work with real responsibility. "There's one more thing," Claire says as they wrap up negotiations. "I'd like to establish a scholarship fund in Lucas's name for children who've lost parents and want to pursue engineering studies. A way to turn your family's experience into something that helps other kids facing similar challenges." The proposal has been months in development. Lucas looks up from his homework, eyes wide with excitement. "Really? A scholarship with my name on it?" The wonder in his voice reminds Claire of everything she's learned about the difference between abstract corporate philanthropy and personal investment in individual lives. Really? Claire confirms. With your name on it, managed by people who understand what it means to keep working toward dreams despite everything. 6 months later, Claire finds herself presenting Hammond Industries' new community development initiatives to local business leaders and civic organizations. The changes haven't transformed the company overnight, but they represent a genuine shift toward practices that create value for communities rather than simply extracting it. Ryan sits in the front row, wearing his first business suit and carrying proposals they've developed together. The most satisfying project is the Torres Family Engineering Library, established in the space where Ryan's grandfather's garage once stood. The library provides technical resources and tutoring for students pursuing engineering certifications, exactly the kind of support Ryan wishes he'd had during his years of midnight studying. Lucas cuts the ribbon at the opening ceremony. That evening, as they clean up after the dedication ceremony, Claire finds herself thinking about the chain of coincidences that brought them together. A broken car, a man studying by flashlight, a child drawing airplanes. None of it was planned, yet it changed everything about how she understands success and responsibility. Do you ever wondered what would have happened if your car hadn't broken down that night? Ryan asks, echoing her thoughts as they stack chairs and collect coffee cups. If you'd made it back to Cleveland without stopping? Claire considers the question seriously. I think I would have kept signing acquisition papers without thinking about the people behind them, she says honestly. And I would have kept studying by flashlight, probably for years longer. Ryan adds, might never have finished the degree, might never have found work that uses my education. He looks around the library space, taking in the computer workstations and study areas that represent everything he wished for during those long nights in the garage. So maybe it wasn't coincidence, Claire suggests. Maybe it was just what needed to happen. The idea feels both mystical and practical, recognition that sometimes the most important changes come not from careful planning, but from unexpected encounters that force us to see familiar situations from entirely new perspectives. The flashlight has been retired now, replaced by proper lighting in Ryan's home office, where he prepares reports that shape policy for a major corporation. But the spirit it represented, the willingness to keep learning despite inadequate resources and uncertain prospects, continues to influence everything they build together. In her rearview mirror, the lights of Millbrook fade into darkness, but Claire knows she'll be back next week for another round of planning meetings and community consultations. The work never ends, which is exactly as it should be. Real change isn't a destination, but a direction, not a project with a completion date, but a commitment that must be renewed with each decision. The man studying by flashlight has become an engineer designing sustainable futures. The boy drawing airplanes that don't crash has become a young scholar preparing for aviation safety career. The corporate executive who once signed papers without considering their human cost has become someone who measures success by community impact as much as financial returns. None of them are the same people they were when Claire's car broke down on that dark street, when desperation and coincidence brought together 3 lives that needed each other more than any of them realized. The changes represent the possibility that systems can evolve, that institutions can learn, that individual encounters with suffering can generate collective commitments to justice. The Flashlight Scholar's story continues, not as a tale of triumph over adversity, but as an ongoing experiment in what it means to build something valuable from fragments of what was lost, to create hope from honest acknowledgement of harm done and patient work of making amends.